Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. My name is Dan Schneider, and I'm your worship associate this morning. Our urban community welcomes all with love, supports learning and spiritual growth, serves our wider community, and works for justice, equity, and inclusion. We're glad you're here this morning. Following the service, there will be announcements of upcoming events. If you'd like to learn more about these events, our community, or any of our programs, please contact us at member-care@firstuu.com. We begin our service by lighting our chalice, the chosen symbol of our faith, with words adapted from the work of Welsh author, scholar, ethicist, and activist Arthur Powell Davies. Ordained as a Methodist minister in 1925, Davies became a Unitarian in 1933 and served the Unitarian Church in Summit and All Souls Unitarian Church in Washington, D.C. until his untimely death at age 55 in 1957. None of our private worlds is big enough for us to live a wholesome life in it. We need the wider world of joy and wonder, of purpose and venture, of toils and tears. What are we, any of us, but strangers and sojourners, forlornly wandering through the nighttime until we draw together and find the meaning of our lives in one another, dissolving our fears in each other's courage, making music together and lighting torches to guide us through the dark. We belong together. Love is what we need, to love and to be loved. Let our hearts be open, and what we would receive from others let us give, for what is given still remains to bless the giver, when the gift is love.
Fix This Mess by Ted Arnold. Robug came in a box. Jake turned it on. "I am ready," said Robug. Yes, said Jake. "Fix this mess." "I will fix this mess," said Robug. No, said Jake. "Fix this mess." "I will fix this mess," said Robug. No, said Jake. "Fix this mess." "I will fix this mess," said Robug. No, said Jake. "Get rid of this mess." "I will get rid of this mess," said Robug. No, said Jake. "Put it all back." "I will put it all back," said Robug. Okay, said Jake. Now, Robug, fix this mess. I will fix this mess, said Robug. Jake missed a spot, said Robug. Right now, we're living in the middle of a big old mess made by years, hundreds of years of oppression. We're not going to fix it by throwing money at it. We're not going to fix it by asking somebody else to do the work. We're only going to fix it if we put in the work ourselves. I wonder, what work are you willing to do?
Even dreams fall apart in the wind and the rain. Wild waves of storm rushing, and nothing is ever the same. When your whole life's been washed away, and it's hard to see the light, you just call on a friend with a hand to lend, and together you'll be alright. 'Cause we're all in this together, in the good times and the pain. We can't wait till the storm is over. We gotta learn to work in the rain. When your faith is drowned in a river of lies, when hope is washed away and courage is hard to find, you gotta keep your head above water, hold on and believe. You reach out to a friend with a hand to lend, and those waters will soon recede. 'Cause we're all in this together, in the good times and the pain. We can't wait till the storm is over. We gotta learn to work in the rain. In every life the rain will fall. That's just the way it must be. Yes, the waters will rise, but if hope stays alive, even the storms can set us free. So it's up to you and me, 'cause we're all in this together, in the good times and the pain. We can't wait till the storm is over. We gotta learn to work in the rain. 'Cause we're all in this together, in the good times and the pain. We can't wait till the storm is over. We gotta learn to work in the rain. We gotta learn to work in the rain. We gotta learn to work in the rain. Work in the rain.
We got to learn to work in the rain. Sometimes it feels like that rain will never stop. Sometimes it feels like there's no end to the storms that plague us. no end to the violence in our society, no end to death and suffering. But I assure you, there is an end at some point. And those are the times when we stop to acknowledge those joys that come to us, however small and fleeting they may be. Those are also the times when we're in that rain where we have to acknowledge that we're in it, that we admit that we are hurt, that we claim our fears and our sorrows. We do that here at First Church through our stones and water ritual. Each one of these stones represents a particular joy or a sorrow that we're carrying in our hearts. And they also represent the passage of time. We've been using these stones for as long as I've been here, and pulling them out and reusing them week after week, so that in effect each one of these stones carries with it many joys and many sorrows. What we do with them is we drop them in water that was blessed by this congregation during our water communion at the start of each church year, and we carry some of that forward from year to year. In that water, we have all the things that we say we bring to our community: love and patience and kindness and joy and laughter and wisdom and all of those things. So when we drop a stone in the water for our sorrows, we do so in the hope that the water will soften our wounded hearts and ease our fears. When we drop a stone in the water that represents our joys, we ask that the water amplify that joy and that gladness, that it can spread to others. Let us call to mind some of the joys and sorrows of this particular community. First, on behalf of my sister Marcia and my entire family, I thank you all for the cards, so many cards and calls and messages as we grieve the loss of our beloved Pap. Also, Nate Miller is grieving the loss of his 4-year-old daughter, Nala. Nala was killed by her own mother and her mother's boyfriend. A GoFundMe has been created in her name to support Nate and the rest of the family. The information is posted on our discussion listserv. If you're not on that listserv and you'd like information, please send us an email at member-care@firstuu.com. Also, Jane Kay's daughter-in-law, Kate Steele, is at Good Samaritan Hospital with her son Joshua constantly at her side. She has severe preeclampsia and the baby isn't due until July 1st. Please send healing thoughts and prayers for Kate and for baby Emmett. You know, we have one last stone here. And this stone is for those that we don't know, for those whose joys and sorrows are a mystery to us because we have no connection to them or we don't know them personally. This last stone we drop in water for those who continue to suffer from the ravages of COVID-19 and its economic and social impacts. It's for those who are victims of gun violence, for those Asian Americans who continue to be targeted for hatred, for indigenous folks who have lost their land, whose land was taken from them, for those who continue to suffer from loneliness and depression, illness and grief. we drop this stone in water for them. Join me in a moment of brief prayer. This is a prayer offered by Reverend Chip Roush. He asks us to breathe, to let go of the expectations placed on us by others and those they taught us to place on ourselves, to drop the guilt and the shame, not to shirk accountability, but in honest expectation of the possibility of forgiveness, to let go of the thing you said the other day. Let go of the thing you dread next week and just be here in this moment. Breathe here. And finally, I share with you a photograph of Karen Gregerson, the late wife of Nelson Horseman. Let us now pause in a moment of silent meditation, reflection, and prayer.
Each month, we designate one of our Sunday plate collections to benefit a special cause or local social service organization. This month, our donations will go to support our programs at South Avondale Elementary School. We've been involved with South Avondale for 11 years. We started with a tutoring program for kindergartners, helping them to understand the importance of reading, the joy and wonder of reading, and to leave kindergarten reading. We've been quite successful with that. And through the relationships the tutors formed with their students, we have grown too. We also started an endeavor that supported reading for all students, preschool through 6th grade. That is our Love My Books free bookstore, where students get to choose books from lots of donated books, take them home, and add them to their own libraries. Again, we too have learned from this endeavor. We have learned to look for books the children can relate to, not the ones we relate to. Our work with South Avondale Elementary has been incredibly fulfilling for all who have participated. Working together with the students, teachers, school administration, and parents, we've helped give these youth the gift of literacy. And there is still so much to be done, and we need your help to do it. Please watch this brief video from First Church member Lee Ramstad on how you can be involved.
Hi, my name is Lee Ramstad, and I need to talk with you. It's about some serious challenges at South Avondale Elementary in this upcoming year as a result of a virus and poverty. As we all know, children in America were expected to learn virtually, and that includes kindergartners. who are supposed to learn to read in kindergarten. In February, I talked with the instructional assistant, and she said to me that few children were showing up for virtual, and when they opened the schools in second semester for 2 days a week, that only 2 children came. Now, in years past, in February, there would have been about 50 students in kindergarten, and only 2 came. She said normally at that time of the year, they would be working on sentences, writing them, grasping kind of the ideas of sentences. But this year, those who were showing up were working on getting their sounds. A sounds like ah. That means, and then what else happened now for this next year is that the kindergartners that were enrolled, whether they could read or not or knew the sound of a single letter, will be put in first grade. So now we'll have first graders who know very little about reading and kindergartners who know very little about reading, which means we've got twice the number of students who need help. I want you to think about tutoring. Here's what you need in order to tutor a cute little 5 or 6-year-old child who wants and needs to learn. Number 1, you need to know how to read at a 6th grade level. Number 2, you need to be available for 1 hour per week. That doesn't mean that if you're sick or your car breaks down, you can't tutor ever again. No, we'll get you a substitute. Number 3, you need to be willing to sing some very simple songs. Now, I'm not thinking of Rosie Park here. We know what a wonderful voice she has. We don't care if you're a good singer. We don't even care if you're on key. But we'd like you to be there to encourage the kids. Number 4, you need to like and respect children. And number 5, you need to believe in positive reinforcement, such as, wow, you're doing such a great job. I can't believe you remember that from last week. That's wonderful. Okay, and you might think about getting a friend or relative to join you. Remember, our principles are 7 principles. This hits at least 4 of them. Please think about it. Bye-bye.
If you're not able to participate as a volunteer, perhaps you can support our work at South Avondale by making a financial donation. We are collecting funds for our work at South Avondale Elementary through the month of May. You can donate via text by sending the message GIVE to 513-717-7373. If you prefer to write a check, please make it payable to First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati with South Avondale on the memo line, and mail it to 536 Linton Street, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45219. You may also make your donation online at firstuu.com or through our Breeze member system at any time. Our offering will now be gratefully received. Thank you. Our reading today is Time for the Work by Teresa I. Soto. Reverend Soto is a minister of the First Unitarian Church of Oakland, California, and the author of Spilling the Light, Meditations on Hope and Resilience, the sources of this reading. I'm not prepared to hear you say one thing and watch you do another without even mentioning it. I'm not talking about mistakes. You know we all make those. Sometimes we speak too soon and think too little. We worry more about procedures than promises. We let fear and guilt keep our choices and actions small. Those things, common and human, keep calling us forward to different, better choices. I'm thinking of a different thing, in which you know the right thing to do and spend entire notebooks of calculations on figuring out how not to do it. Or conversely, you give it no thought at all. It's understandable that to learn, the student must be ready. And if you choose not to be ready while the world cries out for your help, choose to linger in indecision and shrug off the human cost, you are wasting the gentle flexibility of grace. And as Frederick Douglass said, using your liberty for unholy license. You must account for this day. Choose justice. You must account for your gifts. Generate love. Your effort in community is a precious resource. Take courage. Move with urgency toward every possibility. Please hurry. Don't stop.
In recent days, it's been inspiring to watch as millions of people have taken to the streets to demonstrate their belief that Black lives matter. As we all know, change is slow, but the history of our country has shown that change happens when individual people stand up, speak out, and demand it.
I remember stories that my grandpa used to tell about the olden days when very few were living well, when times were hard and most folks lived with trouble and despair. And meanwhile those in power never saw or seemed to care. Now history does repeat itself, and some things never change. So when I start to lose all hope, I think used to say, sometimes you gotta make a way. Sometimes you gotta take a stand. Sometimes you simply gotta get right up. Speak your mind. Tell the truth. Oh yes, no more thoughts of giving up. No more thoughts of giving in. No more waiting oh so patiently, quietly, cautiously. Oh no, now it's time to take a chance. Now it's time to face your fear. Now it's time to use your voice. Now you haven't any choice. Oh no, it's not a time for asking why, and it's not a time for me oh my, and it's not a time for standing by. It's a time for rising up. Sometimes you gotta make a way. Sometimes you gotta take a stand. Sometimes you simply gotta stir things up. Call them out, scream and shout. Oh yes, now it's time to spread your wings. Now it's time to state your case. Now it's time to speak up fearlessly, forcefully, urgently. Oh yes. Sometimes you gotta make a way. Sometimes you gotta take a stand. Sometimes you simply gotta get right up, speak your mind, tell the truth. Sometimes you gotta make a way. 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 Sometimes you gotta make a way.
We find ourselves at the end of our Widening the Circle of Concern series of sermons. For those who aren't familiar, Widening the Circle of Concern is the title of the report issued by the Unitarian Universalist Association's Commission on Institutional Change. It examines our movement's efforts and commitment to be more equitable, diverse, and inclusive. Over the last several months, we've talked about theology, hospitality, governance, religious professionals, liberation, innovation, and risk-taking. In addition to covering a topic during each service, we've had discussions that have allowed us to go even deeper. And our last discussion will be held this month on the third Wednesday of the month on Zoom. If you'd like the Zoom information to access the discussion or a copy of the report, please email us at member-care@firstuu.com. We're reading this report together as part of our year of discovery, where we've been looking at how we want to be together, how we hold one another, and how we sustain ourselves and our community. These questions and others have generated discussions that have been lively, thought-provoking, encouraging, stimulating, joyful, frustrating, and even at times quite painful. And still, this is how we grow. Just as babies experience the pain of teething and our bodies go through spurts where shoes and clothes no longer fit comfortably because we're growing physically, so too do we experience discomfort and tension and conflict as we grow emotionally and spiritually. It's all part of the process. Now, I expect that these last topics in the report will produce many of the same feelings. Our last topics are restoration and reparations and accountability. With our discussion of these topics comes the question of whether Unitarian Universalism owes something to people of color, to indigenous people, and to others within our faith and our communities who have been oppressed. As I reread the Commission's report ahead of this service, I began to wonder, what does anyone owe anybody else? What do we owe one another just by virtue of our coexistence as living beings on this planet? Two quick answers came to mind for me, and they might for you as well. Nothing, and it depends. There are those who believe that we are all just individuals living of our own free will. We may choose to do things or make promises that obligate us to others, but we aren't required to do so. I live my life, you live yours. I don't owe you anything. And then there's the "it depends" answer. I owe certain behaviors and things to my partner, my family, and my friends, but I can't owe anyone or anything to a person with whom I have no relationship. Any discussion of what we owe to another by its very nature suggests that we're giving up something of our own. We're assuming some obligation or burden, giving up our personal rights. How do we balance that? These aren't new questions. Humans have been contemplating them for centuries. Bridget Cogley, philosopher and author, says, "We have struggled for centuries to answer these questions. We've debated the answers across epochs, forgotten some of them and buried others. At worst, we've twisted morals for our own benefit at the expense of others, and at best, propelled possibilities of lifting so many across time and space, both with stories that indicate the chosen path that is our true nature." And we could spend days here going deep into moral and political philosophy, but don't worry, we're not going to do that. We're going to take a very, very high-level view for just a moment to put a few things in context. Let's start in 1651. English philosopher Thomas Hobbes published Leviathan, or The Matter, Form, and Power of a Commonwealth, Ecclesiastical and Civil. Written during the English Civil War, Leviathan is about the need for individual members of society to turn over some of their personal rights to government. In that case, a strong monarch. Hobbes wrote that we intentionally surrender these rights for the security and other benefits that government can provide. And as expanded by John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, this theory would become known as social contract. Our personal and individual rights in this kind of paradigm exist on a spectrum. And sometimes those rights are affected or even limited for the good and protection of all. Bridget Cogley studied the scope of personal rights with particular emphasis on how those rights have been affected by the pandemic. She noted that as we explore rights in an ecosystem, we can see where certain interpretations of rights can affect others, giving some nearly unlimited rights and others far fewer. This, she says, creates freedom for some and not for others. For the oppressed, there's the appearance of rights as others experience it, but with significant restrictions for the oppressed individual. She calls this the gaslighting zone. The gaslighting zone creates tension and ambiguity. Those who aren't restricted don't see it or deny it, and at worst, perpetuate it. Those who are oppressed struggle against arbitrary walls set forth by power dynamics. These dynamics are often systematized and codified in law, practice, and data. So let's add another layer on top of this. Let's add the notion of contractualism espoused by Harvard professor Thomas Scanlon. Scanlon wrote that people create agreed upon roles and rules in society, and that morality is living up to this social contract of created rules. What we owe one another is what we create. This is a much more expansive response than our original easy answer of, it depends. We say we owe worth and dignity to every person, and then offer that worth and dignity to our families, our own families, and not others. We support the dignity and survival of those most like us, those who are the same as us, the same family, the same gender, the same ethnicity, the same citizenship, the same age, the same occupation, or residents of the same city. I'm going to give you a practical example here. Have you ever heard a teaser on the news where they say, coming up next, the story about an awful disaster or a fire or an accident? And then when that story comes back, you lose interest because you find out that the accident happened somewhere on the other side of the world. Oh, it's not here in Cincinnati, I don't have to worry about it. Or that it affected folks in a country that you didn't even know existed. We do this far too often. But what about the things that we can't relate to? What about these things? Or these issues that are affecting the people who are not the same as us? What do we do about them? Do we not care? Do we not owe some duty to the people who are experiencing these things? I wish I had the answer. I'm just raising the question. But really, what I think is this. What we owe one another is to treat each other in accordance with our value as living human beings, even when that affects or limits our own personal rights. I know I can't expect you to follow the news in every country around the world and to know about everything that's happening everywhere. But still, we owe something to one another. That notion of justice and fairness and equity, that's what we owe one another and what we should be striving for in society. Cogley illustrates this point with two quotes, one from James Baldwin and the other from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Baldwin said that we can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist. King said, an unjust law is a code that a numerical or power majority group compels a minority group to obey, but does not make binding on itself. This is difference made legal. King offers that a law is unjust if it is inflicted on a minority that, as a result of being denied the right to vote, for example, had no part in enacting or devising the law. So, how do we pull all this together? Well, Cogley says that from Hobbes we learn that there are limits to our rights. From Baldwin, we recognize that realities are not the same and that certain principles will never be agreeable to some. And that principle in particular from Baldwin's situation is that he is a human worthy of justice and equal treatment. And from King, we find a framework on how to overcome systems that create barriers by giving the minority a voice. And then on top of this, Scanlon teaches us that beyond the roles we have in life, we also have an essence. All those other things that we are, parent, minister, sister, musician, Democrat, stamp collector, genealogist, dog lover, whatever you are. And at our very core, we have an existence, which is our physical and mental well-being. What we make in the world takes our essence, all those things that we are, and turns it into form. So what we owe to one another is that which we make in the world, our creations. And those creations shouldn't infringe on another's existence. Instead, they should support another person's essence rather than detract from it. That is what we owe one another. The right to exist as human beings worthy of justice and equal treatment. The right to vote. The right to be seen. The right to learn how to read as a kindergartner. This is what we owe to one another. What I owe you and what you owe me and what we owe every being on this planet. And when we recognize that, we're able to decenter ourselves and our own rights. We're able to view the world in a way that doesn't infringe upon or usurp the rights of others. We view the world in a way that increases freedom for all and for ourselves as we gain a wider perspective on life and being. So what about Unitarian Universalism and the Commission on Institutional Change? I haven't forgotten that. Restoration and reparations. What Unitarian Universalism owes to us and what we owe each other as Unitarian Universalists is to re-examine our own history. As the Commission says, it would behoove Unitarian Universalism to look inward at its own history of oppression and exploitation of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color, as well as the harm that has been articulated by members who are people of color in the near past and present. And to study and learn about the history of our own institutions and the models of redress being discussed and advocated for by Black leaders, by Indigenous leaders, and by other leaders of color. We must acknowledge that Protestant theological thought helped to articulate the conflation of European identity with Christianity, with rightness and purity, to develop the concept of whiteness, inversely establishing anti-Blackness. Because religious institutions and groups often create, maintain, and cultivate cultural ideas, their complicity with racism, anti-Blackness, and white supremacy culture must be acknowledged and owned. While Unitarian Universalism does have a history of resisting slavery and supporting the civil rights movement, it also has a history of institutional racism, support for cultural racism, and its own experience with religious oppression of Black people as evidenced by the empowerment controversy. The Commission states, indeed, when one reads Unitarian abolitionist opinions on whether Black people had the right to physically resist kidnapping during the debates over the Fugitive Slave Act, or the opinions of Unitarian volunteers during the Union Army Port Royal experiments about whether Black people could maintain basic human industry, overtones of modern discussions on animal rights echo. Surely, the Commission says, if our first principle is to be believed, these captive people had worth and dignity. Although their dignity was assailed, it was not degraded or diminished, and we should not disregard it now. And when we respect their inherent worth and dignity, we must conclude that they deserve justice. They deserve the justice that this generation is able to afford their memories. So what we need to do, according to the Commission, is to identify and address and stop the many ways in which our institutional practices have caused harm, and heed the cries for equity from people of color in our own Unitarian Universalist community. They call for adopting the following principles of reparation. Resources need to be redirected toward investments needed to accomplish reparations, as well as transform and shift our culture and practice toward more inclusion, diversity, and equity. Risks should be borne by our systems and institutions and not just by individuals. Promising practices should be identified, curated, and made available as models. And a more uniform, flexible, and culturally competent regional structure is essential to support this institutional change at the congregational level. Specifically, this means providing funding and administrative support for groups that allow Black, Indigenous, and people of color and other marginalized groups to convene and gain the support needed to worship and serve in predominantly white communities. This means that we are providing methods of encouraging and channeling productive conflict, so as to decrease harm. It means that we are establishing channels and procedures for identifying harm, making amends, and financial reparations. And most importantly, it includes widespread practices going forward of acknowledging Unitarian Universalism's foundational complicity with racist practices, especially against indigenous people and Black people. And whatever we create as a system must include provisions for holding ourselves accountable through ongoing monitoring and training and inclusion of the voices of oppressed folks, not as the subject of the discussion, but as part of the discussion. This is what Unitarian Universalism owes us. This is what we owe each other as human beings entitled to justice and equal treatment. Let us work together to make it so.
We extinguish our chalice by reciting together the words that appear on your screen. Together we say, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
To think about what you owe every person you pass, every person you see, every person you don't see, every person you can imagine. Set aside your own rights and privileges just for a second and think, what do I owe you? How can I be of service to you? Go in peace. We have some announcements for the coming weeks. The first is that we'll have a forum to meet the candidates for the Board of Trustees. Our candidates are Amy Bottomley, Barbara Dickerson, and Kim Clokey. The first of these forums will happen next Sunday morning at 9 a.m. and the second on the 16th at 11 a.m. Our congregational meeting is May 23rd at 11:15 a.m. You may have received an email about our budget forum for today. That budget forum was canceled by the Finance Committee, and there will still be another forum on Thursday and a future date to be determined. Please watch your email for agendas and information to prepare for the congregational meeting. Next Sunday, all 6 of the Unitarian Universalist communities in Cincinnati will be gathering for a joint worship service, celebrating the power of lay leadership in our communities. This service will happen on Sunday, May 9th at 10:30 a.m. Note the change in time on Zoom, and will include participants from Harmony, the Fellowship, the Gathering at Northern Hills, Heritage Universalist Unitarian Church, St. John's, and First Unitarian Church. I hope I got all of them. And Hopedale, thank you. Opening Hearts and Lifespan Faith Development are sponsoring a book discussion. This is the UUA Common Read. It's being read by congregants and members all over the country. Breathe, A Letter to My Sons by Imani Perry. The sessions are May 1st, 7th, and 14th, from 10:30 to 12, and from 7 to 8:30. Getting to Know You, YOUU, is our informal gathering for visitors and those who are interested in learning more about First Church. The next one will be happening on Sunday, May 9th after service. Contact member-care@firstuu.com for Zoom info.